One wedding, 3 men, and a secret I never saw coming. I didn't lose my mind, I took her to court. You think you know how you'd handle something, until you're actually living it? I mean, it's easy to have an opinion when it's someone else's story. But when it's yours and it hits you right in the chest, that's a whole different kind of weight. Growing up, my home life was far from peaceful. My parents were constantly at each other's throats. Arguments were the soundtrack of my childhood, and one day, just like that, my dad walked out. I was 9. Old enough to remember the sound of the door closing, too young to fully grasp what it meant. I had an older brother and sister, but they were already out in the world. He was 21, she was 19, both away at college. They were building their lives while ours back home was quietly falling apart. Now they're both married, living out in the States. I barely see them unless it's around the holidays or if they swing by during one of their vacations. Their bond with mom isn't strong anymore, not since she remarried. From what I've pieced together, I was kind of the last try. A kid born in hopes of saving a marriage already breaking at the seams. For a while maybe it worked. But the peace didn't last. The arguing came back, louder and sharper than before. And then everything truly shattered. Dad found out mom had been unfaithful. She shot back that he had done the same years earlier. It was like watching two people locked in this endless loop of blame and betrayal. Then one day during a heated fight, mom blurted something that changed everything. She told Dad I might not even be his. Even as a kid, I felt the floor drop out from under me. He didn't say much then. But the next week, Dad went and got a paternity test. When the results came in, both of them looked stunned. Turns out, he wasn't my biological father after all. The next morning at 9 o'clock sharp, he filed for divorce. He was the only dad I'd ever known. We weren't especially close. He worked a lot, always on the road driving trucks. But he was still Dad. And then he was gone. After the split, we talked now and then, but it was never the same. When I finally got up the courage to ask Mom about my real father, all she could say was, "I don't know. I always thought it was him." Just like that. No answers. No closure. Just confusion. Those years weren't easy. I learned a lot more than I probably should have. Like how Mom had always been a bit of a wild spirit. She married young, had my siblings before she even turned 21. Once Dad started traveling for work, she started going out with her coworkers more. From what I gathered later, they both cheated, over and over again. After the divorce, Mom didn't settle down again until I was 18. But that didn't mean she was alone. I'd often go stay at a friend's or crash at my grandparents' place on weekends, and during those nights, different men would come by. None of them stayed when I was home. That part of her life stayed mostly in the shadows. Then came the part where I tried to build something of my own. I was 22 when I met Marin. She worked as a secretary at the lumber yard where I was pulling long shifts. We clicked pretty fast. First a coffee after work, then hanging out more often, and before I knew it, we were more than just co-workers. We were married within a year. Marin had this flirty charm about her. She had a way with people, light, easygoing. I chalked it up to her personality. She told me she was a virgin when we met. Honestly, I didn't dig too deep. I wanted to believe her. I chose to believe her. Our life felt ordinary in the best way. We'd hit the movies, visit friends and family, go out to eat at least half the time. The rest of the nights, Marin would whip up something simple. Mac and cheese mostly. She wasn't much of a cook, and that was fine by me. We were both working, both tired, just trying to make it work. And back then I thought we were. It all felt manageable. Until it didn't. I'd be lying if I said the thought never crossed my mind, whether Marin had ever been with someone else. It wasn't something I wanted to believe. But I guess growing up the way I did, with the kind of example my mom set, those doubts just had a way of creeping in. I never told Marin much about my mother. Just that she dated, nothing more. I definitely never told her the full truth, that when I was a kid I used to sneak a peek through the hallway cracks watching my mom with different men. Not something you ever want to admit, especially not to your wife. But that kind of stuff leaves a mark. Makes it hard to trust even when you want to. Our sex life seemed fine. Normal even. Nothing wild, but intimate enough that I didn't think much of it. The truth is, we got married because she told me she was pregnant. When she sat me down and said she was expecting, I didn't hesitate. I asked her to marry me right then. Felt like the right thing to do. I liked her a lot, thought maybe real love would come with time. Her family didn't see it that way. From the beginning, they made it clear they didn't think I was good enough for her. I think they blamed me for everything, mostly for not being more careful and getting their daughter pregnant. In their eyes, Marin was innocent, could do no wrong. Meanwhile, I was always trying to prove myself, knowing they'd never really give me a fair shot. The only person in her family who didn't treat me like a problem was her younger sister, Kathy. She was a couple of years younger than Marin, soft-spoken, kept to herself mostly. Nothing like her older sister. There was something about Kathy's quiet kindness that stuck with me. She never judged me, just listened. And if I'm honest, I always felt a little pull toward her. Not in a romantic way exactly, but she was the only one in that family who ever really made me feel seen. A few months into the pregnancy, around the 5th month, Marin lost the baby. That was 2 years ago. We've been married nearly 3 now. I've asked her a couple times gently if she's ever been with someone else. She always says no. Says I'm the only one. During the moments when we're closest, I've even asked her if she's ever thought about being with another man. She just smiles, tells me she doesn't need anyone else, that I'm more than enough. Back then I was young. Naive really. I didn't know much about life or how complicated things could get. After I graduated, Mom's new husband gave me the speech, that it was time I figured things out on my own. So I found this small apartment and landed a job at the local lumber yard. Life felt pretty good. I was working steady, making enough to get by, dating now and then. Like most guys my age, I was interested in girls. Curious, hopeful. Thought maybe I'd meet someone who'd stick. That someone turned out to be Marin. We met while I was working and things moved quickly. A few dates turned into sleepovers and next thing I knew we were talking about the future. She had this flirtatious streak, always did. But I thought it was just her way. She was warm with everybody, full of energy. Claimed she was a virgin when we first got together. I wasn't sure at the time, but I didn't push it. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Her being flirty didn't bother me much in the beginning. I chalked it up to her just being social. But over time, things started to rub me the wrong way, especially when we were out with other people. I remember one night in particular. We were at this bar with some friends, music playing, drinks flowing. She got up to dance, which was fine. But the way she moved, pressing up against some guy she barely knew, laughing over her shoulder at me like it was a game, that stung more than I expected. It wasn't just dancing. It was the way she'd let guys put their hands on her, how she'd lean into them, rub against them like I wasn't even standing there. I stopped dancing that night. Just stood by the bar, nursing my drink, watching it all happen. Every now and then she'd glance over at me, smirk, like she knew exactly what she was doing. And maybe she did. I never laughed along with them. Not once. That night, there were 3 guys surrounding Marin on the dance floor. 2 of them were old friends from high school, and the third was just someone tagging along. I'd never seen her act like that before. The way she moved, the way she leaned into them, it was like I didn't even exist. I walked up to her again and told her we needed to cut this short, that if she didn't stop, we were leaving. But she barely acknowledged me. Said she was having fun, brushing me off like some uptight stranger. She was so caught up in the moment that I doubt she even heard what I said. That's when Tony stepped in. He made it real clear I wasn't in control of anything. He told me Marin came willingly, that I had 2 choices, watch or leave. And then he reminded me that there were 3 of them and only one of me. If I stirred up trouble, I'd be the one paying the price. He even made sure I noticed the knife he was carrying. The worst part? He was right. I've always been able to handle myself one-on-one, but this wasn't that. Against 3 guys, especially with one holding a blade, I didn't stand a chance. Then I heard her voice, Marin. She asked Rob, who had just come into the room. He said it was Tony and Ben. That hit me like a punch. She didn't sound panicked. Just surprised. Oh my God, Rob, she gasped. You with him? Ben asked like it was a joke. Please, you have to let me go, she said. My marriage depends on it. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Your marriage is over, I said flatly, standing in the doorway. They all turned to look at me. And laughed. One of them called me weak. Another said I should have seen this coming. I just shook my head, heart racing, and walked out the door. They were right. Back upstairs, I packed a bag slowly and quietly. There wasn't a part of me that still believed in that marriage. Not anymore. My problem now wasn't just that I'd been betrayed, it was that I'd been humiliated. And I couldn't go on living like that, pretending it hadn't happened. I knew I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could take back control. I told myself I'd get even, somehow. I had to. That night, she didn't even come home. Kathy, her sister, ended up bringing her back the next day. I didn't stick around to see it. Instead, I rented a storage locker, moved most of my things in, and found a room I could pay for weekly. I didn't need much, just a place to lay my head. On Monday, I walked into the lumber yard and handed in my notice. Marin didn't show up to work that day either. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe shame. Either way, it made my exit easier. I told my boss I was moving out of state. Gave him a local P.O. box so he could forward my last check and any savings I had built up. Then I hit the road in my pickup, heading toward a job I'd lined up that started the following Monday. I found a decent trailer for sale in a quiet little park. It came furnished so I didn't have to spend much. Picked up my things from storage, settled in. It was a fresh start. Or at least it was supposed to be. A few days later, I stopped in at a Bob Evans outside of Steubenville, just looking for a hot meal and a moment to catch my breath. And wouldn't you know it, Kathy was my waitress. The look on her face said it all. She was angry. "Why'd you leave Marin like that?" she asked, her tone sharp. "Just because she danced with a couple of guys from high school?" I didn't answer right away. I could tell she didn't know the half of it. Later that week, I spoke to my lawyer again. He told me if I was serious about filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery, I'd need full names and addresses of the men involved. Problem was, all I had were first names: Ben, Tony, and Rob. No last names, no way to trace them. I figured maybe Kathy could help. We agreed to meet for dinner. But when I saw her, I could tell she was still in a mood. She'd heard from Marin that I was trying to build a divorce case on cheating, and Marin was calling it a lie. As we looked over the menu, Kathy sat across from me, arms crossed, jaw tight. It wasn't going to be an easy conversation. When Kathy and I sat down that evening, I told her straight, I wasn't there to play games or hide anything. "I'll be completely honest with you," I said. "I've got no reason not to be." She looked at me, quiet for a moment, then glanced off toward the corner of the diner. I could tell she wasn't sure what to make of it. "I need the full names and addresses of Rob, Tony, and Ben," I said gently. "Do you think you could get that for me?" She turned back to me slowly. "Why?" she asked. "My lawyer says I need it for the divorce papers. I'm filing on grounds of adultery." There it was. Out in the open. Kathy sighed. "You do realize what you're asking me to do, right? Marion's my sister. And you're asking me to betray her. To take your side." "No," I said. "That's not what I'm asking. I'm not looking for you to take sides. I just need that information to move forward. That's all." She didn't answer right away. And I didn't push. I knew it wasn't easy, being stuck in the middle, hearing two versions of a story and not wanting to believe either one. But that's where she was. Eventually, I got word from my lawyer that the divorce would be finalized in about 4 months. That gave me some peace. But then came another blow. I was still listed on the lease of the apartment Marin and I had shared, and the renewal was coming up in 2 months. Legally, I was on the hook for half the rent until the lease expired or she signed a new one. At least after that, I'd be done, free of a life built on lies. But freedom didn't feel like enough. I still carried this ache inside, this burning need for something more. Call it revenge, or justice, or just wanting her to feel some piece of the pain I'd been dragging around. Looking back, maybe I should have just walked out that night and never looked back. Maybe watching her with those guys, just standing there and letting it happen. That was the real moment I lost myself. I told her she didn't deserve me, called her out for what she was. And all she could say was, "Don't tell Mom and Dad." I left that night knowing everything she'd said before, about loving me, about being loyal, had all been hollow. Lies made to keep me still. And still, a part of me felt guilt, like I'd done something wrong by letting go. About 3.5 months later, Kathy called. She said she needed to see me. I didn't ask questions. I just felt a weight lift hearing her voice again. We met outside the city at a small lounge just off the highway. Nothing fancy but quiet. We slid into a booth, ordered drinks, and I looked at her across the table. "So, what's going on?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her purse and handed me something folded up, her work schedule for the next month. Before I could say anything, she stood up, leaned in, and gave me a hug. I saw the tears in her eyes just before she turned and walked out. Maybe she did want to see me after all. I knew it couldn't be easy for her. She was stuck between the sister who'd betrayed me and the man who had quietly stayed in her corner. She hadn't told her parents we were still talking, and from what I understood, Marin was still spinning her own version of the story. Now and then I'd stop by the diner for breakfast, timing it so I'd catch Kathy working. We didn't talk long, just a few minutes in between coffee refills, but seeing her, even for a moment, always calmed something in me. One morning, I told her that I'd mentioned to Marin I knew about her and Rob, and that she might want to let Rob know he was going to be a father. Kathy's face dropped. "Jim, you told her?" "I told you not to say anything. It just slipped," I said. "No one else knows. Not even the guys at work." She looked away, biting her lip. "You shouldn't even be coming here to see me." "I'm divorced now," I said softly. "I thought, maybe we could get together sometime." She let out a slow breath. "Jim, this is a busy time for me. I'm working, trying to finish out the semester. Finals are coming up soon." I nodded. I understood. Even if I didn't want to. Kathy had mentioned once that she was graduating with a nursing degree soon. I respected that. She was building something for herself, trying to rise above all the noise. Meanwhile, I was sinking deeper into my own. There's a small lot next to a bar just off the highway, not well lit, tucked behind a few shops. I waited there that night. It was close to midnight when he finally came out. I looked around. The street was empty. Quiet. The kind of quiet that tells you no one's going to ask questions. I pulled a thermal mask over my face, one of those cold weather ones that covers everything but your eyes, and reached for the baseball bat I'd brought along. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I couldn't stop myself either. Not anymore. He didn't hear me approach. He was messing with his motorcycle, probably adjusting something on the ignition. I stepped up behind him and swung hard. The bat cracked across his lower back and he let out a muffled yell, spinning around too late. I hit him again, this time across his arms as he threw them up to shield his head. He had his helmet on, thank God, but the impact still sent him stumbling. One last swing, square into his ribs. He dropped to the ground, groaning. I stood over him, heart pounding like a drum in my ears, then turned and walked away into the dark. Revenge might not fix everything, but in that moment, it felt like it gave me a piece of myself back. I wasn't finished though. Thanks to Kathy, I knew Rob spent most Saturdays with Marin. I figured he fed his wife the usual line, some excuse about working late or hanging with friends. Gave him the whole afternoon to crawl back into bed with my ex. Around noon that Saturday, I drove to his house. I'd heard his wife's name was Sheila. She'd gone to school with Rob and Marin. Small town, everybody's connected. I knocked and a woman opened the door. She was dressed in sweats, looked tired, but still carried herself with that put-together kind of grace. Behind her, I could hear two little kids laughing and running through the living room. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Is Sheila home?" I said gently. "I'm Sheila," she replied, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. "I'm sorry, but I need to tell you something. I think your husband's with my ex-wife right now. Marin." She didn't say anything for a second, just stared. So I pulled out my phone and dialed Marin. She picked up after a couple rings. "What the hell do you want?" she snapped. "I know Rob's there," I said calmly. "Put him on. I have something to say to him." "He's not here," she lied. "Cut the garbage, Marin. I can hear him in the background. Put him on." There was a pause. Then a shuffle. "Hello." Rob's voice came through the phone. "You remember me?" I said, my voice cold. "Good. Sheila's listening. Say hi to your wife." I handed the phone to Sheila, whose face had gone pale. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. "You're sleeping with her again? You creep." Rob tried to talk, but she cut him off. "Get out. Don't come back." Later, Kathy told me Sheila had kicked him out that same day. Said he deserved whatever came his way. Their parents were shocked when they found out Rob had gone back to Marin, but I wasn't surprised. Rob moved in temporarily with Ben and his mother. Ben, if you remember, was the other guy from that night. His own life had gone south a while back. His wife had left him for someone else and he'd ended up back home with his mom. She was a tough woman, worked as a bartender at a local dive. From what I'd heard, she'd raised Ben pretty much on her own after his dad skipped town. Funny thing is, a lot of us came from broken homes. Me, Ben, even Kathy and Marin. Maybe that's why we all ended up tangled together in this mess. What hurt most wasn't just what Marin did. It was knowing that no matter what she'd done, her family would still make excuses for her. She was always their favorite. In their eyes, she could do no wrong. Kathy, on the other hand, was the opposite. Quieter. Smarter. Honest. But always overlooked. I wanted to be with Kathy. Really, I did. But she had so much going on. Between waitressing at the diner, grinding through nursing school, and putting in hours at the hospital as a nurse's aide, her plate was more than full. I kept telling myself maybe her time, and maybe our time, would come. Still, I tried to stay out of trouble and keep moving forward. One night after work, I went to a bar with a few buddies just to unwind. I never expected to see Rob and Ben sitting there at one of the corner tables. For a second, I didn't even recognize them. It had been a while, but there they were, laughing like nothing had ever happened. Rob looked right at me and cracked a joke. "Hey, it's Marin's old man," he said, chuckling. "Wonder what she's up to these days." I clenched my jaw and started to walk away back to my own table. But truth be told, what Ben muttered under his breath gave me pause. It wasn't anything direct, just a passing comment, something like, well, he should have handled it differently. I didn't know whether to take it as an insult or advice. That night, my buddies reminded me they had my back if I ever needed them. No drama broke out, but the tension stuck with me. It always did. The next weekend, I ended up at a bar I'd never been to before. Just a small neighborhood place, maybe a dozen people scattered around. The kind of spot where everybody knows everybody, so when I walked in all eyes turned. New face in a familiar room. I sat at the end of the bar and ordered a drink. Nothing fancy. Just needed to sit with my thoughts. That's when I met Helen. She was working behind the bar, middle-aged, silver highlights in her hair, confident in the way she carried herself. Friendly smile, quick wit. We got to talking. She told me about her ex, how things fell apart and how her best friend was now crashing on her couch. He's getting divorced too, she said, rolling her eyes. Must be something in the water lately. She smiled. I nodded. Yeah. My ex got caught in the middle of something she had no business being in. I left and never looked back. Helen looked at me for a moment, then said, Dang honey, sorry to hear that. We kept talking. It felt easy, lighter than I expected. I told her I hadn't really been with anyone since the divorce. She laughed a little playful. You trying to pick me up? She asked. Maybe, I said with a grin. I'm old enough to be your older sister at least, she replied, smirking. I'll be honest, I'd never been with an older woman before. But Helen carried herself with the kind of assurance that was hard to ignore. We ended up spending the night together, and for a while, it felt like something I'd been missing, just being seen, being wanted. The next morning, I found her asleep, peaceful. I covered her with a blanket and cleaned up quietly. As I was leaving, I made sure everything was in order. I didn't want to leave a mess behind, not in the room and not in her life. But peace didn't last long. A few nights later, I was arrested. Turns out someone had come forward about the incident with Rob. I don't know who called it in, but the police showed up with a warrant for assault. It didn't matter that he started it, or that I felt like I'd just reached my breaking point. What mattered was I'd taken things into my own hands. They said I'd be arraigned on Monday morning. Until then, I'd be sitting in lockup. My lawyer told me it wasn't worth posting bail just yet, it wouldn't change much before the hearing. That weekend behind bars felt like a slow crawl through every bad decision I'd ever made. I thought a lot about the past, about the fights at home growing up, about marrying someone like Maren, and about how I ended up falling for her sister, Kathy. When you're alone in a cell, the past comes back sharp and loud. You start asking yourself questions you never had the time, or courage, to face before. During my arraignment, the judge looked over the file and said, Mr. Williams, you claim to have a witness who can shed light on this situation? My lawyer nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Since Mr. Rob Avery is unavailable to speak, we intend to present someone who can explain exactly what led to all of this. I sat there quietly, hands folded, wondering how many more chapters this story would have before I could finally close the book. I'd like to hear from the witness, the judge said. And that's when Kathy walked into the courtroom. You could hear the hush fall across the room. Even the quiet seemed louder somehow. People weren't expecting her, especially not her parents. She didn't look at me. She didn't glance toward her mother or father. She just walked straight and steady to the witness stand and sat down like she'd been carrying this weight for months and finally had somewhere to set it down. A woman in uniform, maybe a clerk or court officer, stepped forward and swore her in. Kathy kept her eyes forward, voice clear. She wasn't timid, just tired. Miss Jennings, the judge asked gently, would you tell us exactly what you observed on the morning in question? Kathy nodded. Yes, sir. She paused, took a breath. Well, she began, it really started months before that day. My cousin's wedding. It was almost 9 months ago now. She turned slightly as if addressing the courtroom more than the judge. Jim told me that night he saw my sister, Maren, in a very compromising situation. He said it was consensual, she was with 3 men. And that image, that betrayal, it never left him. Maren shot up from her seat, her voice sharp. That's not true, she blurted out. The judge leaned forward, calm but firm. Mrs. Holder, what part isn't true? Did you or did you not have relations that night with someone other than your husband? Maren froze. She opened her mouth like she had something to say, but the words never came. She sat down. The judge turned his attention to Rob Avery. Mr. Avery, he said, it seems to me that much of this altercation stemmed from your ongoing relationship with the defendant's former wife. You provoked Mr. Holder and he responded in kind. Now, I'm not excusing Mr. Holder's actions. But I also see no reason to elevate this further. As I understand, your medical expenses were mostly covered by insurance, aside from a $200 out-of-pocket payment. Is that correct? Rob nodded, clearly not as cocky as he'd been before. Yes, Your Honor. The judge shifted his tone. Mr. Holder, please rise. I stood. I understand what drove you. Truly. But you can't take justice into your own hands. You're responsible for what happened, regardless of the emotions involved. You'll be expected to cover the remainder of Mr. Avery's expenses and attend 6 anger management sessions. But beyond that, this case is closed. He struck the gavel once and it was over. Rob didn't say a word as he walked past me. But before he left, I handed him a DVD in a plain case. "What's this?" he asked, frowning. "Something to watch," I told him. "Just, don't watch it with your mom." He stared at me like I'd spoken in a different language, then tucked it away and left without another word. The next weekend I was back at the bar with a couple of my friends. Ben was there too with a few guys of his own. At one point he came over and asked if we could talk in private. I could tell by the look on his face, he wasn't there to pick a fight. Something had shifted. We stepped outside. "Jim," he said, "don't ever talk to me again." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. "And, I'm sorry. About everything. About the wedding. About that night." His voice cracked a little. I think he meant it. Later, Kathy and I met again. Just the two of us. It was quiet, and neither of us had much to say at first. But I had to thank her. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of that," I told her. "Testifying in court, it couldn't have been easy." She looked at me, her eyes steady. "I wasn't doing it for you or for her," she said. "I did it because it was the truth. That's all I ever wanted, just to be honest about what happened." I nodded. I knew her parents had been angry at first. But she told me they came around, eventually. Maybe it was the shock of it all. Or maybe they finally saw Maren for who she really was. Either way, Kathy stood by me when no one else would. And for that, I'll always be grateful. In the end, I think I did the right thing. It wasn't easy, and there were moments where I felt like I'd lost everything, but somehow life started finding its way back. One afternoon, I asked Kathy, "So what was it you needed to tell me?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Maren had her baby this morning. A little boy." There was a pause before she added, "He's a cute one, but you don't need to worry about DNA tests." I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" Kathy gave me a look, half apology, half confirmation. "The baby's clearly Hispanic. No one's questioning it." I leaned back, letting that sink in. So many months of anger, confusion, and second-guessing, and now the final piece just landed. A few days later, Kathy invited me to the restaurant to talk more. "Don't worry," she said with a wink. "You won't get locked up. You'll be fine." I showed up, and she handed me a ticket to her graduation ceremony. Along with it was a schedule showing when each group of nursing students would be walking the stage. Her college was huge, over 1,000 graduates, so they split the ceremony up by degrees and time slots. Parking was a nightmare. They actually had to bus people in from satellite lots. But I made it. Inside the stadium, the place was packed wall to wall. Families cheering, proud smiles everywhere. I flipped through the program to find Kathy's name and figure out where I might be able to meet her afterward. They had a designated area for graduates and their families to reunite. I waited patiently. Eventually I saw her, standing with her parents, tears of joy running down her face. Her dad hugged her, her mom kissed her on the cheek, and to my surprise even Maren was there. Kathy hugged her too, and Maren hugged back. For a brief moment, all the broken pieces looked like they were trying to heal, even if just a little. I stood back about 20 feet away. I didn't want to interrupt that moment. She deserved to have that time with her family. Then out of nowhere, Kathy looked up, caught my eye, and smiled. A couple of nights later, I was back at my trailer when there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw her, Kathy, standing there with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her face. "May I come in?" she asked. "Of course. But what are you doing here? What about your party?" "It was fun," she said. "But everyone went home and I kept thinking about you. So I packed an overnight bag and came by. I hope that's okay." I grinned. "I'm glad you're here. The trailer's a bit of a mess though. Wasn't expecting company." She laughed and looked around. "Do you at least have clean sheets?" "Fairly clean," I said. "Changed them 2 days ago. Been sleeping on the couch watching TV." That night we held each other close. It wasn't about the past anymore, it was about this moment and the ones ahead. The next morning, we went out for breakfast at the same Bob Evans where she used to work. The waitstaff still remembered her. It felt like a full-circle kind of morning. Later that day she took me to her parents' house. We sat in the living room, drank coffee, and had a real conversation. No judgment. Just understanding. After that, things moved gently between us. We started dating regularly, but we agreed, no rush to get married. Not yet. Kathy had just started her new job as a nurse, and we both wanted to take things slow and steady. We saw each other at least 4 nights a week. Talked on the phone most days. She stayed over often, and even when she didn't, I'd find myself thinking about her smile, her laugh, the way she grounded me when my world had been spinning. We were saving. Building. Not just money but trust too. The future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living again. Thanks for listening. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Have you ever stayed silent when your heart was breaking? Would you have done the same? And hey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We've got more stories to tell. Some messy, some healing, all human. See you in the next one.